I don't want him in the starting lineup. Those 7 words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin already pulled. Shohei Ohtani didn't say them in anger. He didn't say them in frustration. He said them quietly. Calmly. With the kind of certainty that comes from absolute conviction. And when those words reached Dave Roberts' ears, everything changed. Because Shohei Ohtani doesn't make requests like that. Ohtani doesn't point fingers. Ohtani doesn't demand personnel changes. Ohtani plays. Ohtani performs. Ohtani keeps his head down and lets his bat and his arm do the talking. But on this Wednesday morning, with Game 3 of the Athletic Series just hours away, Ohtani made an exception. And what prompted it? A trade that nobody saw coming. A purge so shocking that it left the entire baseball world stunned. 3 players gone. 3 key pieces of the roster, designated for assignment in a single devastating stroke. The Dodgers weren't just making adjustments. They were conducting an organizational overhaul. And somewhere in that chaos, something had broken. Something fundamental. Something that required even Shohei Ohtani to speak up. The announcement came at 9:47 a.m. Pacific Time. Andrew Friedman, the Dodgers' president of baseball operations, called a press conference. Not an email. Not a leaked report. An actual, sit-down in front of cameras press conference. That alone told you something significant was about to be revealed. The Los Angeles Dodgers have agreed to a 3-for-1 trade with the Oakland Athletics, Friedman said, his voice steady but carrying the weight of a major decision. We are acquiring outfielder Kyle Harrison and pitcher Daniel Robertson from Oakland. In exchange, we are sending 3 players, second baseman Miguel Rojas, relief pitcher Chris Martin, and utility player Gavin Lux. The room went silent. Not confused silence. Shocked silence. Because those 3 names represented something. Miguel Rojas was a veteran. A clubhouse leader. A steady presence who had been with the organization for years. Chris Martin was one of the most reliable bullpen arms in baseball. And Gavin Lux was a homegrown talent. A former first-round pick who had developed into a solid contributor. 3 good players. 3 established pieces. Gone in one trade. But that was only part of the announcement. Additionally, Friedman continued, we are designating for assignment 3 other players, starting pitcher Trevor Bauer, outfielder Tracy Thompson, and infielder Freddie Galvis. These moves are effective immediately. Now the room wasn't silent. Now it was chaos. Questions erupted. Hands shot up. Reporters were shouting over each other. Because designating for assignment meant those players were no longer part of the organization. They would be placed on waivers. Other teams could claim them. But effectively, their time with the Dodgers was finished. 3-for-1 trade. 3 more DFA'd. 6 players impacting the roster in a single morning. It wasn't just significant. It was unprecedented. Friedman explained the reasoning. The Athletics had agreed to take salary. The Dodgers needed to clear payroll space for something. For what, he wouldn't say. Not yet. But the implication was clear, something bigger was coming. Something that required opening up roster spots and financial flexibility. Dave Roberts sat beside Friedman. The manager's expression was difficult to read. He was in support of the moves, that much was clear. But there was something else there. A tightness around his eyes. A slight tension in his jaw. Like a man who understood the implications of what was about to happen. When asked about impact on the clubhouse, Roberts chose his words carefully. These are baseball decisions, he said. Difficult baseball decisions. But necessary ones. We have to evolve. We have to adapt. And sometimes that requires making moves that aren't easy. It was diplomatic. It was measured. It was also completely inadequate for answering the real question everyone wanted to ask: what the hell is going on? The news hit the Dodgers clubhouse like a shockwave. Players found out through text messages, through social media, through the grapevine that runs through every professional sports team like an electrical current. By 10:15 a.m., everyone knew. By 10:30 a.m., the clubhouse was in turmoil. Miguel Rojas sat at his locker in disbelief. He'd been told privately by Roberts 15 minutes before the public announcement. But being told and accepting it were two different things. Rojas had spent years building something in Los Angeles. Building a life. Building relationships. And now he was gone. Chris Martin was packing his locker when Will Smith approached him. They didn't say much. What was there to say? Martin had been a stalwart of the bullpen. Reliable. Consistent. And now he was out. Gavin Lux was the hardest hit. Lux had grown up in this organization. Had been drafted by the Dodgers. Had developed here. And now, at 28 years old, in what should have been his prime, he was being sent away. The three newly designated players, Bauer, Thompson, and Galvis, were in various states of shock. Trevor Bauer, the controversial starting pitcher who had already had his share of drama with the organization, seemed almost expectant. Like he'd been waiting for this moment. But Thompson and Galvis? They were blindsided. "This is brutal," one veteran player said, speaking on condition of anonymity. 6 guys in one morning. That's not a trade. That's a purge. And it was into this chaos that Shohei Ohtani walked. He'd been in the training room when the announcement dropped. His routine. His sacred ritual. By the time he emerged, the clubhouse was already in turmoil. Players were packing. Making phone calls. Trying to process what had just happened. Ohtani took it all in silently. His expression didn't change much. But those close to him could see the shift. The recognition that something fundamental had changed about this team. He went to his locker. Sat down. And after about 10 minutes, he called for Dave Roberts. "Can we talk?" Ohtani asked. His voice was quiet. But there was something behind it. Something serious. Roberts wasn't expecting that. He came immediately. Brought Mark Prior with him. They went into the manager's office. Closed the door. And for the next 7 minutes, Shohei Ohtani made a request that would define the Dodgers' season going forward. What exactly was said in that room, we don't know. Ohtani, Roberts, and Prior have never revealed the specifics. But within the hour, the starting lineup for Game 3 against the Athletics was announced. And one name was conspicuously absent: Trevor Bauer. Bauer had been scheduled to start. Had been announced as the Game 3 starter less than 24 hours earlier. But now, with the trade and the DFAs, there was a question about his status. And apparently, Ohtani had settled that question. What Ohtani said in that room, what he requested, came out in pieces. Through reports. Through sources. Through the careful reconstruction of what transpired. But the core of it was unmistakable. "I don't want him in the starting lineup." Not, "I don't think he should pitch." Not, "I have concerns about his performance." Something more direct. Something more personal. Something that suggested deeper issues than just baseball. The exact reason? That's where it gets complicated. Sources suggest it had to do with Bauer's attitude in the clubhouse following the trades. With comments he'd made. With the way he'd reacted to the news that his teammates were being sent away. But the specifics remained murky. What we knew for certain, Ohtani had spoken. And Dave Roberts had listened. Within hours, the Dodgers' Game 3 starting pitcher was changed. Instead of Bauer, it would be a younger, less experienced arm. A kid who'd been pitching in AAA a month ago. A player who was getting his first major league start in a game that suddenly mattered a lot more. Roberts addressed it obliquely in a brief statement to reporters. "We've made lineup adjustments based on organizational needs and input from various stakeholders," he said. "Trevor Bauer will not be starting Game 3. We're going with a different arm." When pressed on whether this was related to the trades, Roberts paused, gathered his thoughts, and then said something that confirmed everything. "The events of this morning required us to reassess everything, including our approach to Game 3. We believe this decision is in the best interest of this team." That pause. That careful phrasing. That was Roberts confirming what everyone had figured out: Ohtani had made a request, and Roberts had honored it. The trade itself was bewildering. Why send away Miguel Rojas? Why part with Chris Martin? Why designate Gavin Lux, a player still in his prime? The financial benefits were there, shedding salary opened up options. But for what? Rumors began circulating immediately. The Dodgers were clearing space for a mid-season acquisition. A big-name pitcher, perhaps. Or an elite bat. Something was coming. Something significant enough to justify dismantling key pieces of the roster. But what made this story bigger than the trade itself was Ohtani's involvement. Because Ohtani's request raised a question that baseball had been grappling with for years: how much influence should one player have over roster decisions? In the past, only a handful of players had wielded that kind of power. Ruth, DiMaggio, Mays, Bonds. The absolute elite who could essentially dictate terms. But modern baseball was supposed to be different. Supposed to be more democratic. More system-based. Less dependent on any single player's preferences. But Shohei Ohtani wasn't just any player. Ohtani was worth the entire franchise valuation himself. The Dodgers had signed him to a 10-year, $700 million contract specifically because of what he brought to the organization. His presence. His talent. His ability to impact the game in multiple ways. And when that player spoke, you listened. "What we're seeing is a shift in power dynamics in baseball," one analyst said on ESPN. For decades, management controlled the narrative. But now, with players like Ohtani, we're seeing the pendulum swing the other way. When your franchise centerpiece makes a request about personnel, you don't ignore it. The trade and the designations were about roster construction. But Ohtani's request was about something deeper. It was about culture. About standards. About who belonged in that clubhouse and who didn't. Trevor Bauer hadn't done anything egregiously wrong. He hadn't attacked teammates like Dalton Rushing had. He hadn't crossed any obvious lines. But apparently, in Ohtani's view, there was something about his presence that was incompatible with what the Dodgers were trying to build. And Roberts, to his credit, had listened. Game 3 would go forward. The young pitcher would take the mound. The Athletics would bring their best. And the Dodgers would field a lineup that looked different from what anyone had expected that morning. But more than the game itself, what mattered was what this moment revealed. Revealed about Ohtani's character. Revealed about his influence. Revealed about a team that had decided, at the highest level, that culture mattered more than convenient explanations. Miguel Rojas would eventually sign with another team and find success. Chris Martin would be claimed on waivers and contribute to his new organization. But those facts wouldn't change the reality of this moment. The Dodgers had undergone a shocking purge. And at the center of it all was Shohei Ohtani, quietly making demands, quietly reshaping the organization in his image. Not through anger. Not through ultimatums. Just through the simple reality that when a player of his caliber speaks, people listen. The torn number 68 jersey from Freddie Freeman's confrontation with Dalton Rushing had symbolized one kind of leadership: aggressive, physical, confrontational. But Ohtani's request symbolized a different kind: subtle, powerful, undeniable. Both were real. Both were necessary. And both would define the Dodgers' season going forward.